evening, everyone.
Hello.
It is delightful to see so many people. I strongly suspect I know why, and I suspect it is not my goaty self. So, thank you to my absolutely fabulous panel tonight for being here. And apologies to everyone for the fact that we had some it's EV Mux. We always have technical difficulties, but they were especially good tonight. And of course, the dog is going to go nuts because I forgot to shut my office door for the first time ever. It was discovering that my entire studio had exploded when I signed in.
That'll do it.
So, I don't know. I feel like intros are a little bit redundant tonight, but just for anyone who might have lived under a rock for the last, we won't talk about how many decades. We will go around the horn. Everybody can talk about who you are. Where I generally like to do when you got started in gaming, and then where you currently are, and then we'll say hello to the chat, and then we will get on to tonight's discussion. Mr. Cook, if you would please, sir.
Hi, I'm Monte Cook. And some of my best friends live under rocks, so nothing wrong with that. So when I got started in gaming as a gamer was 1977, I think. But started working in the industry in 89 was when I first started writing for Iron Crown Enterprises. And today I am I'm the head of Monte Cook Games, and we make Cypher System stuff, which includes Numenera and old
games that I teach new gamers how to game on.
Cool.
It is one of my favorites to run. Just a quick interrupt. Goofus has sent $7.99 Australian. Stop bringing on likable, skilled, and accomplished RPG designers. All anyone wants to see is Hopper the House Bunny bring out the rabbit. Thank you very much, Goofus. Yeah, Hopper's mad at me today because she didn't get to get out of her crate because we had other animal emergencies. So, Lord Mateus.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I am nowhere near as, I guess, as accomplished as my two co-panelists here.
I thought you were going to say old.
No, accomplished. But I got into the game. I bought the Red Box basic set back in 1988, and I just fell in love with the hobby. And I've been running games ever since. I am the forever game master. I have been with stuff for Shadow Dark and the Red Room. I've even written for Lamentations and Flame Princess. You can find some of that stuff on Drive-Thru and on Lulu. I also have an itch page. But I guess the real reason why I'm on here is I have a show called The Second Watch. It's on YouTube and on Rumble. Rumble, you'll find it under Gaming with Lord Mattias. But on YouTube, it's The Second Watch at Lord Mattias. And my friend Gary and I, we've been doing this for about 2 years now. We talk about games. We talk to creators about their games. We talk about how to improve our game mastery. And I think what got the Eclectic Goat like laser sights on me is because we've been running quarterly guest appearances of accomplished designers and authors on how they approach world building. We've had Alexander Macris on. We've had Ben Gibson. We've had Rob Alderman of Gods of the Forbidden North on to discuss this sort of thing. So it's a topic that I'm interested in. I think a lot of game masters are interested in it, and I think it's one of those things where the more you do it, the more you talk to people about it, the better you're going to get at it. So a treat for me.
All right. Uh, and I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. You get
Oh,
garbled.
oh no, no garbling. Garbling bad.
Yes.
Excellent. Do you prefer Malix or Mike?
Whatever. Malix, Mike. Born Mike Michael. I went by Alex for a long time. My dad was going up the Rainbow Bridge. I switched back to the name he gave me, and some smartasses at Scare for a Cure, which is a haunted house in Austin, Texas, were like, "Whoa, Mike and Alex, you're Malix," and I fought back, and I pushed back against that for a long time, and like, look, I dress like a wizard in public. Being called Malix is kind of a gift, so I kind of stopped fighting it, right?
Okay.
But whatever. My friends call me Mike.
So you want for
So one
the
weird
people
thing about being me
for the
that
people in my chat who are like 20.
that whole game people have about, I guess it's true of a lot of hobbies. The whole like Jaws, comparing scars. How long have I been in? Somebody always, I'm on this edition or that edition. Like that's the game I can always win. Which it's funny because it's not really a boast because I was a kid. So it's nothing I accomplished, right? All I accomplished is not stopping. Um, Gary and Gary's friends and associates were one up a stone in a pool. They're one ripple out. Then they started to move away. And then the Kafka went to Chicago, and one of his two groups in Chicago was my family. So that's where Nystul came from in the books. Nystul was originally just a name that was all of my family and my dad, who never wrote anything but was garrulous and charming. That eventually Nystul became me. And I went to work for TSR. I briefly worked with Monty, but never got to work directly with him. But we were friendly, like check in on each other in the hallways kind of guys.
Yep.
My position in the industry is I realized a while back that I'm the guy in the back of a lot of photos of very important moments in gaming, looking chuffed as hell to be there. And I didn't have like an important part of any of it, right? Like I was at TSR and I was in my first phase where you don't get any important assignments yet. So I wrote like the Sword Coast liner notes for the DVD they did. Sorry, the CD they did. Like the stuff I got to do, they clearly had hired me, Tim Brown. They wanted to give me a line, but we weren't in Wisconsin long enough because that was right when they were bought out. Then almost everybody moved to Seattle. I didn't go, but again and again that happened, right? So I'm in so many different photos being like tall, skinny dude, like, whoa, look at this. Um, these days, I kind of retired out of gaming for a while. Was raising my kids, then my kids were like, what is this, Dad? I'm like, oh shit. Then they both game now. And now I run Nystul Game Vault, which is a small vanity press. If there's something I feel like doing, I release it through Game Vault, and I'm going to be doing a series of most likely D&D, maybe Shadow Dark, depending on what I want to do. It writes, but I want to do a series of old school module adventures. So my N series that never existed, N1, N2, N3. I should also mention I've got a game out called Nuked, which is the elevator pitch is if you used Shadowrun to run Fallout. That's kind of what Nuked is.
Sorry, if you used Shadowrun to run what?
Fallout.
Oh,
The video game.
yes.
So post-apocalyptic, but with a weird sense of humor and magic.
I am reminded of the people who look at me all the time and say, "I don't like Shadowrun. Keep your magic out of my cyberpunk."
Well, the post-apocalyptic RPG world, when I started it, was for a live play with some friends of mine at Rooster Teeth. And at the time, the only thing that was currently out in that genre was the old Gamma world that wanted you to buy collector card packs to buy your feats. That the gamers went, oh no, we're not doing that. So that crashed and burned fast. So when I started Nuked, there was nothing out. And right now, if you want that, and there's people that don't want the peanut along with their chocolate, they've got so many options. Go ahead.
Yeah.
There's some great ones out there. There's not a lot that do have magic in the same kind of approach. So if that's what you want, come here.
I always I guess I have to say which edition of Shadowrun, because I was always really partial to second.
I was there when it was originally released, so the re-release was very nostalgic. And again, there's a picture with me and Tom Dowd, and we had it shipped from the printer to the con floor, and I'm in the back, literally doing this, And I didn't, because again, I didn't write Shadowrun. I eventually wrote Bug City and a bunch of other popular stuff for it, but I was just like industry gadfly, happy to be there, dude.
All right. Looking at the chat, Legatus, as is almost always the case, was first. Good evening to you. Squishy Banana was here 4 hours early, talking about those of us that don't like to be late. Ozymandias apparently was worried about not being able to find us. We're delighted you made it here. Trapped Chest, I have arrived. Everyone roll initiative. Vendover, welcome. Good to see you in the chat. Lots of people chatting back and forth. Hat is here saying blarg. Goofus was here with a squawk before his donation. Let's see. Who else do we have?
And yes, the machine spirits are righteously pissed off right now.
Yeah.
Very good point.
I am also looking forward to this stream and looking forward to all of the questions that I expect we are probably going to get from the chat. Savage Brewski says, "Tall, skinny dude, did somebody call me?" Trap Chest also says Shadowrun is greater than Cyberpunk 2020. Magic adds to the chaos. Racer is the master. Is the master of links. Thank you very much. Yes, I do have a Ko-fi. These days, donations are pretty much going to medical bills and possibly better goat fencing. I spent 6 hours today repairing goat fencing for goats that are probably going to walk through it in 6 minutes. Delightful little buggers that they are. All right, so world building. Oh, and Tank Ferret is here. Good afternoon to all of you magnificent people. Good afternoon to the magnificent ferret. So the reason I wanted to do this topic is this was one of those like random thoughts you have while you're, staring off into space doing dishes and whatnot. And all of a sudden it occurred to me, how come there's never any animals in worlds unless they're there specifically for PCs to like interact with? Granted I live in a rural environment, but most places, there are bugs and there are birds and there are stray cats and yet so few places just have like animals that are not, that are just part of the world. And that thought continued. I took a walk with my mother a couple of days later to it's like a preserve that's near here. It's just walking paths. But they have these just random pieces of art that they like bring in and they just stick it, like literally you'll be walking through a field and all of a sudden there'll just be this giant stone statue for absolutely no reason. And I thought it's also interesting that there's never any art unless it's there to be investigated. Like, it's like no one ever creates anything unless it's there for the PCs to like get a clue from. And I think that's maybe why some of the worlds in games I have played felt kind of two-dimensional. And so I'm sort of interested in everybody's thoughts on that.
You dropped the word never there. That's never been my experience. I mean, maybe there isn't as much words spilled that invite you to put those things in, but certainly when I'm running, I mean, to be fair, I've done a lot of run fairs. So if you've been to run fairs, there are animals, there are sights and smells and art everywhere. So if you at all are drawing on any kind of sense memory or experience, those things are going to be front and center. Um, so are you talking about like the fact that we're not direct? You don't feel that we're directed by setting guides to provide those details?
Um, well, so I edit a lot for new games. And I do think that there has been a change over the years. I mean, I think that um, a lot of the older games I've read do have a lot more of those details. My theory is that people have gotten used to video games. And when you go into a video game, there is immediately a spotlight on the thing you're supposed to pay attention to, or the this, go this way sign. And so my theory is that a lot of players have gotten used to the fact that if anything is ever mentioned in a scene, it must be the thing that they have to pay attention to, not just a scene piece. Um, and I also think that that's why new writers tend to write that way.
Well, I'm extremely happy to be able to say that I have had exactly the same thoughts that you just described, and particularly, well, I shouldn't say particularly. I'll say, for example, when I was working on Numenera and developing it as a setting, because it's a billion years in the future, there's no dogs or cats or squirrels anymore. Everything, evolution has taken its course and everything is different. So I was sort of beholden to fill the world not just with monsters that are going to rip you apart, but also, what do the herders herd? And, who pulls the cart? And what do you see when you look up in the tree? What's nesting up there? So I did a lot of that, and similarly, because art is so important to me, like it is the core of my world building process, to be really honest with you. And so, the work that I have, I love to put just art that makes you feel like, oh, that's what it's like to live there, and not just that's the entrance to the dungeon, or that's the big bad guy, or whatever. I'm totally in agreement with you. I love that kind of stuff. It's the stuff that I think it fuels immersion. It's the kind of thing that makes me want to read about a fictional world when I'm not at the game table, right? And just, those little details are always very interesting and make everything seem normal.
Yeah, I'm going to chime in here. From a game master's perspective, I know I like to try, just like immersion's the goal. Like we're sitting around rolling dice, and we like, as players, we like collecting our points, whether it be gold pieces, experience points, or whatever. But we also want to put ourselves into that place, this like quasi-dimensional thing that we're all sort of sharing, the shared reality. And I like to throw in those details when I'm running something, because if you're on your way to the store, right, a mundane task, you get in your car and you're driving to the store. Yeah, things are happening around you. The world is moving along with you, and when you're in the gaming space, I think it's important to kind of present that. So, like going into a little bit of detail about animals and whatnot. But the problem is, and I think this may be, I know someone in my limited writing experience, I've run into this. I start going into a little too much detail, and then all of a sudden players think that's important, right? So there's this balancing act, and so you need to. So from a game master's perspective, you got to make sure you're not going too. You're not directing players' attention too much. And I think from a writer's perspective, and maybe you gentlemen can chime in on this, but from a writer's perspective, you want to give the information, kind of like we were talking about, Monty, like, hey, these are what the herders heard, right? So now the game master has that information in their head. So when the players are moving through this area, he can be like, oh yeah, and the herder, you look to your left, and in this field you see these animals being herded or whatever. But at the same time, it can't be. I think there might be a balancing act there too, because you don't want to turn your game world setting, supplement, whatever, into some sort of I don't know what the word I'm looking for, uh, anthropological treatise. It's still a game, right? It still has to be fun to read. It still has to have gameable material.
So
That makes
my poor dad, he tried running my brother and I once, and I was a arrogant, too smart for his own good, skinny proto goth, and my brother, um, very very smart, wicked smart. So he ran James Bond because he loved the movies, and we had a shorthand as game designers for years after, which we just say if we were looking over a manuscript, we'd sometimes say to each other, "Salt on the pretzels," because what Dad did is he didn't understand the balance that Mateus was talking about, right? And so he dived into like a description of a bar we were meeting some contact at, and it was so verbose that by the time he got to like he mentioned how salty the pretzels were, and he'd completely lost our attention, right? So
sure,
it
yeah.
ended up that material was not helpful. It was you kind of drown in the details, which is exactly what you were getting at.
Yeah, I have. We've all had those like power gamer
Yeah.
type players, right? If you start going into the details of the taste, they're going to be like, "Do I have to make a poison save or something?" Like, "What? I got a ring for that. I got a ring for that." So
There's another aspect to this, and it runs very much counter to what I just said a few minutes ago, right? And that is, you know, if everything in your world is insert funny name here, right? Then the players have no touchstones. So if I'm running Dungeons and Dragons or some other game, right, I'm gonna for sure talk about squirrels and chipmunks and cows and sheep, right? Because everyone knows what those words mean. They don't need a description. Okay, I got you. I understand. We're looking at a herd of cows. That works really well. And in fact, I've gone when I run Numenera. Sometimes I will just say, okay, so you see a herd of cows. They're not actually cows, but they are the closest analog,
Yeah.
right? And so it works because we're translating this from some language that it's not English, right? So let's call these cows, and
So
it just
a
makes
reference that I think is only going to land with Monty. This to me is the Empire of the Petal Throne Jarun problem, which were
yeah.
two magnificent worlds with some of the most in-depth world building I'd ever seen in print, maybe up to this day, right? But it was that. It was they didn't have, and that was you just being a good game master. The whole, because I've done that too. Like, what's that? Well, it's a post-nuclear squirrel. I'm not going to invent another squirrel and give it a
right,
name
right.
because then you have to remember that and you get lost. But Jarun in particular had its own lexicon to the point where it felt so foreign. It was very hard to connect to. So you didn't have that grounded sense that helps you with the immersion that it sounds like Mateus is looking for.
I loved Jorun, but
Oh, it's great.
I was the only one, right? I mean, me and three other people on the planet were really into it, and we didn't game together. So,
There have been several comments in the chat about the fact that it's too hard for a small indie game to put a lot of detail like that in there. I think the game master would have to do a lot of the inclusion, but at least doing a rough sketch of what these might look like. Monty, one of the reasons I really wanted you on this was because I was so impressed that you managed to make a world as alien as Numenera and as futuristic still feel like a fleshed out place that people lived. Um, uh-oh. Did we lose your sound?
oh, can you not hear me?
Oh, there we go. I saw your.
I leaned back too far. I gotta talk to my microphone.
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure. Like I said, EV Mux does occasionally blow up on the sound front. So, um, but people always say, what is it that Wizards of the Coast and like Games Workshop have done that have made them so popular and like have such staying power. And I really think that the lore and having separate lore books may be what kind of keeps people engaged even when they're not actually playing the games, because that's the one thing they both have in common. Um,
So Monty's
that
completely right about art, right? Art, the whole thing, the image speaks 1,000 words. I'm not sure you would have old school TSR without Larry Elmore. You
mhm,
wouldn't have, I could name half a dozen people that define the games we played and then inform the games we now play. And you're better off, I think, at times getting that sense of immersion from tasting it, from looking at splash pages and covers and going, I know that Dark Sun probably tastes dusty, right? I don't have anyone need to write that for me because the
mhm.
way Brom paints, the way some of that stuff is manifested, you know it's hot, so you feel it at the back of your throat. It's dusty, so you have trouble getting enough saliva to even spit. You know, just by looking at the way it's shown, the meat's probably tough and needs to be cooked with spices extra long, and that's all there. Um, yeah, art.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up too because my co-host Gary and I, we have this debate. Like, I generally agree with him that art is he believes art is like incredibly, like 100% important. That's like it's almost more important than the game mechanics, and I think
Mhm.
he goes a little too far there. Um, but yeah, the art definitely helps set the tone
Yeah.
and the themes and reinforces themes. I know. Um, I got to this day. I have the from the red box set, that intro adventure that Metzger wrote. The image of Alina just sitting there after she heals you has just like been burned in my brain because she dies, and
Yeah.
like and that totally like helped. You have like these awesome characters that are goodly, but death is real, right? And that kind of helped reinforce that. And you're spot on about Brahms' work with Dark Sun. This was like one of my favorite settings in the '90s. Um, so yeah, I think art goes a long way to help with the immersion and give you a sense of what the world looks like, feels like, without having to burden like a gaming supplement or a world supplement or whatever you want to call it, gazetteer, with like just reams and reams and reams of like all this description and I just got into Empire of the Petal Throne, so I'm starting to wrestle with some of the lingo in that, but it
Yeah.
is pretty deep. It's pretty deep.
Take a look if you get a chance. The stuff that Jeff D and Manda did to expand
Yeah,
out that world and present alternative systems, because some of the original systems were not as they weren't second generation systems.
yeah.
They don't have some of the stuff as you know later generation players. I think we feel we need.
It's an
Um,
interesting point to say that, like, source books or even adventures don't need that level of detail or that level of descriptive detail. And I agree, right? You're bogging things down for the GM if you're telling him to tell the players about the dust in the back of their throat. But the other side of that is, at some point, the brand new GM needs to be told, "Hey, describe the dust in the back of their throat." And so I guess that's just a different sort of book, right? It's just an understanding of, like, that's where a game master guide comes in, or a core rule book needs to educate people that way, so that the other supplements don't have to, right?
So at FASA, our solution was the novels. So
yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at when
the
I was
reason I
talking
wrote
about
a
the fact
novel
that
for Nuked was rather than writing like you're walking through a settlement in my post-apocalyptic hellscape with magic, I can write chapters about what that's like and what's there, right? But if I walk you through it in prose, you're going to have that immersion because that's the job of novels. And then you're going to walk away with, and TSR has done an amazing job. Like Louder's largely responsible for a bunch of that, but they've done a magnificent job of taking those worlds and breathing life in a way that, yeah, I think we as developers and designers touch back and forth into the novels to, yes, agreed, Louise. take those things and pull them on, call attention. Like if we're reading a book about Dark Sun, and we liked a passage about the spicy meat, yeah, throw like a box or like a sidebar about like spices in Dark Sun. Make sure to go back and forth. You're playing ping pong between the two kinds of material.
Yep.
Agile Monk has donated $4.99. I have to acknowledge my fan favorite feelings towards Monte Cook and my 52 plus years in this hobby. I know amazing when I see it.
Thanks.
And I think that I like the novel idea. I mean, I got into D&D before I found the Dragonlance novels.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the Dragonlance novels that kept me in it, because honestly, my first jam was really terrible. And is to this day the reason I do not like magic in any system. But so I agree with you on the art for most people. The chat knows this because it's come up before, but so I have whatever the thing is that means you can't visualize. I can never remember what it's called.
Oh, my eldest has that.
And I have it to the point where I don't dream in pictures. So to me, art is nice in the moment, but the minute I turn the page, it's literally gone. It's like I do not have any object permanence when it comes to visual things. On the other hand, and Monty, I feel like we're picking on you a lot here, but the first time I ever ran across Numenera, I'd never heard of the game before. I discovered I was kind of late to the party because all of my friends had heard about it and owned it and loved it. But I found it in a store, and I picked it up, and there's the short story that's at the beginning of the first book.
Yep.
And it's only a page and a half or 2 pages or something. And I was instantaneously sucked into this world, and I spent money I didn't have to pick up a game I wasn't sure I was ever going to be able to run. Victory. Just because I needed to know more about that world. So I think that the art does wonderful things in getting people to pick up the book, but I still think that even those little tiny short stories do a lot to keep us engaged.
As someone who makes words and not pictures, you're not hurting my feelings by saying that words are important too.
You're raising a very important point, though, right? And this is, I occasionally run afoul of the woke is broke crowd, but this is why DEI is important. There are people like my daughter who will never get. She also doesn't have that, and that wasn't in the, I forget the name of it, the manual therapists use. That condition was not in there until 2 years ago. So when I was raising her, I was like, imagination is a muscle like everything else. With practice, you'll get better at it. I was wrong. I had no idea that I was wrong, right? Because I couldn't see through her eyes, through her mind. And so I would say okay, picture an apple. I didn't know I was giving her an impossible task. She could describe an apple. She could go to a store and pick up an apple, but she could never. So, a goat? Do we short form call you goat, or Eka,
yes.
or Eki?
I mean, most people call me goat or goaty or
okay,
you or
so
whatever.
Goaty. But the funny thing about this realization is, I was going to explain how I do this as a GM, and you can't do what I do, because what I do is I create my world as a visual place I can visit. So I'm a fan of the Mind Palace thing, right? Mm-hmm. So when I build a place, I go into imagination, I walk through it. So when I'm GMing, I'm walking around an imaginary place I built and I'm describing it. So it sounds like that's absolutely useless to you.
It is. However, I became a GM in college, and my roommate in college was blind. And it was awesome because I had to learn, when I ran for them, I had to learn how to describe things in a non-visual way anyway. And so the grit in the back of the throat and the fact that there's too much salt on the whatever it was, those are things I use a lot because I And I mean, there are certain things. I mean, logically, I know most apples are round-ish and red,
Right.
but I can't actually visualize one. I've used the example before. I could tell you that my mother is short and has dark hair, but I couldn't actually tell you what she looks like.
Right.
Um,
Huh.
so yeah, so like I have to go about. I'm amazed because I grew up during a time of theater of the mind where everything was done with people describing things visually.
That time
And
is now, sister. Some of us have not abandoned it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
But I think, like honestly, any ability I have to describe things visually, I think are because I grew up during that time. I think if I grew up nowadays, I would be. I don't think I'd be able to GM.
What also sounds like we should have a matching service for people with aphantasia and blind people, because it sounds like you were probably also very helpful to them. So we should make sure that they're paired up and like we buy them free tickets to movies and stuff. What did you just see? Explain it to me. Like that sounds amazing.
I did used to talk about what was going on in movies a lot. We used to go to movies so that I could tell them what was happening. But it's I mean, the thing is, my case is much worse than most people. Like my mother has it too, but she can sort of like, vaguely visualize like a circle or something, like really, really vague shapes. Lloyd Metcalf was on the show and talked about the fact that he has it, but he can still kind of vaguely visualize things. I have nothing.
We've got to get used to the idea that everything's a spectrum, right?
Yeah.
Because there are people that have mild cases, there's people that are very severe is the wrong word because it prejudges and it's not a judgment, it's just different. But you know what I mean.
Yeah. But I think that's why I get into this thing about, I'm surrounded by animals every day. I know what they smell like. I know what they sound like. I know how they, when one of the goats wants to be patted, I know what it feels like under my fingertips. Visually, I could tell you they're brown and they have horns. That's the best I could do.
So, I mean, I'm sure we don't. I'm sure you don't want this whole panel to be about this, but I am so curious. No. Does that mean that you can if you're sitting there at the game table and I say this barn smells like goats, you know what I'm talking. So I guess what I'm saying is it purely a visual based sort of difference, or is it all senses?
It's purely visual. I mean,
okay.
I have been told that people do not ever hear things in their dreams, but I do. And I have dreams where I dream entirely in emotion, but there's no visual. Except once when I was very, very high in college. That is literally, and then I was like, oh my God, is that what people mean when they say they see things? I thought that was just a figure of speech.
So another small thing from theater, when if you've done any scenic design, right, or you go to a theater and you look at the sets, it's a really good use case of providing just enough information. This is not true of operas, because operas, they want to make it big and bold and expensive, right? But usually any community theater, even any like mid, anything below Hamilton, you have a very limited budget and you have to make the carnival look like a carnival. So you need to put things on the stage in terms of, boy, that's a great phrase, a shared imaginary space, absolutely. You're opening your mind palace, letting people in. But you need to put enough on stage to be, oh, that's a carnival. I think in the same way, a GM needs to give you enough details. And in this case, I think when you're talking, if I was running for Goaty, I'd make sure to point out animals a little more often because I would know you as a player and know that part of what's going to tie you in is going to be those things, right? But you only need, if you do too much, you get, I love William Gibson and I love Bruce's work in fantasy. They have a tendency to go cuckoo bananas with the adjectives, right? And the proper nouns. Bruce, everything's got a name. So he wouldn't do it apparently Monty and I do. They wouldn't go, Yeah, it's a snake. It's a space snake, or it's a it's the Coloresta brown, right? But that means when you're reading it, sometimes you tune out a little bit. In the same way, if you're looking at an over ornate and detailed set, you get overload. They found it a little while ago that I'm going to forget the name now because words slip away from me sometimes. Rain Man. So what was the character in Rain Man? He was not autistic.
I mean, by today's standards, he would be like an idiot savant.
Savantism. They
Yeah.
found that one of the things that is your brain is tuning out details so that you have to process less of them. And part of the reason it gets overwhelming is you're supposed to throttle back. So that way your brain only has to handle X number and your brain can process, right? But because something in their circuitry said, not everything, they walk around. I'm full of empathy for them because, oh my God, right? They're processing like I'd be trying to read every book behind Monte. But because I don't have that, my circuit is on, I'm like, well, those are probably things he's written or admires. There's a couple of colors that I recognize. I bet that's that, right? And I can stop my brain from thinking about it. In the same way as GMs, I think all we really need when they walk into the tavern is enough establishing smells, sounds, images. Is there a tavern cat? Because the tavern cat implies tavern rats, right? Is there what kind of music is the minstrel playing? If the music is being played, is it upbeat, or is it a sad song? Is there a story to why they're playing a sad song? But you need just enough to set that scene the same way a theater's stage presence should walk you in as few notes as possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I totally agree with you from a game mastering point of view, and in fact might actually go so far as to say, if you want to make your tavern memorable,
Yeah.
do give them one thing,
Yeah.
right? And so, because if you do that, like, it's a tavern, it's got all the things you expect, but there's a huge chandelier where all these little crystal skulls dangle, right? The thing that you'll create then is the players will say, let's go back to that tavern with the crystal
Yeah.
chandelier, right? It's a thing, it's a common um, it's like a common, you're starting to build a common language to describe the fictional world, because now we don't remember the name of the tavern, right?
Yeah.
But it's that one place with the chandelier.
Well, and that's what my runtime notes look like. Like, I'm not sure what your notes file or paper says, but when I'm running and I'm not using something that's auto dictated, like everything's pre-gen, if I walked into a tavern on the road, I would write exactly what you just said. I'd improvise X, Y, and Z, and then write down cool ass candles. Drunk
But
be there.
am I skipping or is somebody else?
Um,
I think we might have kind of lost Mike.
yeah.
Hopefully he'll be back. In the meantime, I've got a few things that I've got starred in the chat I wanted to go over. Dungeon Delver. Here we go. Adding back. Hang on a second. I think I have to remove him and then add him. I think this happened last time too.
Waving to Bill.
He might have to back all the way out and come back in.
Oh, okay.
There we go. So the Dungeon Delver donated $2. Get Crom and show love to Eclectic Goat. Thank you. Witch Queen. All right, hang on a second. My system's glitching a little bit here. Witch Queen says, something I've always used when I run Empire of the Petal Throne is to describe the smells, and especially the sanitary situation in terms of sewage and waste disposal. I wanted to bring this up because I run a lot of horror games. I, in fact, have turned Numenera into a horror game in a couple of times.
Probably should be.
It's good for that many things. And let me tell you, intense descriptions of the smell of rotting meat do wonders for a horror game. And you mentioned that, you'd say things like, well, it's a space snake. But if you're in a horror game, you don't want to say it's a space snake.
Mhm.
You don't want to say it's a snake at all. You want to say you hear a slithering coming from somewhere in the dark.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
for
Because
sure.
the whole point of good horror is that you don't see things and it's unknown, which may be why I run so many horror games.
Well, that's how I used to run I still run my BX games. I run a lot of horror too, but like there's your players will react differently to the exact same encounter if depending on how you describe it. Like if you just say five goblins, jump out of the bushes and they're snarling and wielding spears at you, they're gonna they're goblins. We know what they are. But if you say five diminutive leathery green-skinned creatures with large yellow eyes, sharp teeth, and they're snarling and gibbering at you, and they're wielding rusty weapons, they're gonna pause because they don't know exactly what that is just yet. So, but I wanted to actually go back to something you guys said about like the specifically like the set pieces on the stage. I got me thinking about Amadeus, and when
Yeah.
Salieri's talking about his like famous like opera, and it's like it's all this lavish stuff, and he's just sitting there, enjoying the music because he likes it, But I can see that being incredibly overwhelming versus something like a brief little ditty created by Mozart, da, 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 right? And I've used something similar when I describe things, usually to NPCs, but I can see this translating to set things like a tavern, where I tell people just pick one thing that is characteristic of that NPC. So like I had like this NPC, sci-fi horror game, lieutenant military guy. He had a titanium toothpick, and whenever he got excited about combat, I would just describe Lieutenant Remy LaRue chewing aggressively on his toothpick. That's all I would say, and everyone would be like, "Oh, great, a fight's about to break out," that kind of thing. So I think that kind of like descriptive detail, but it's just that one thing. This tavern has. I like the idea of the tavern cat. Actually, this mangy cat that's always sitting at the end of the bar, kind of like lazily looks at the players every time they walk in. That one memorable thing will get them to come back and be like, "Yeah, we like this bar." Or what?
On horror, I wrote a book on running horror for chill. But again, you have to be a certain amount of old to even know what chill is. But you got to be a little careful, I think. It's very important to horror in general, both in terms of fiction and other media, but certainly in gaming. There's a concept in improv called platform and tilt. Platform and tilt means you build your platform, which is what the scene is, right? So my platform, I could be playing with Monty and we'd be talking and we'd establish the platform that we're in a doctor's office. We'd establish what our relationship is, what the office looks like. Tilt is when something changes. So something moves the story forward. So we could find out that we're actually on a battlefield, right? And it's a field medical place. It's changed the context of everything, right? So I think it's very important. Absolutely, everything you said, Mateus, is good. But I think you want to start with. I worry sometimes people get trope allergic. I fucking love tropes because they're a place to start. I've had people yell at me, "Don't ever start a game in a tavern," and I've literally smiled and yelled back, "Try and stop me," because then you've got your platform, right?
Yeah.
And then you can tilt, and you get to this point faster. Just like I would say there are some goblins up ahead, but clearly you've got a gift for description. Your description was excellent. But I would then, when they get closer, you want them to stand out. Like you were talking again about, we've got to be careful to not be a TTRPG, electronic RPG, and accidentally a highlighter on something. So if you want to do that on purpose, giving something a more baroque description, I think, says to the players, check that out, right?
Yeah.
So it's a power we have to throttle back and forth.
I agree with that. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, I do agree with what you're saying, especially like when the players encounter a lot of goblins, eventually they're gonna, say, "Oh, they're goblins," and at that point, the shorthand falls in. It's just like I know I play with a lot of experienced people. And when you game online, it's mostly game masters that you're gaming with, so you're running up against that, and so you have to kind of up your game to try to trick them. It's one of the reasons why I actually love Lamentations of the Flame Princess, because there's no bestiary. It's whatever the author wants, whatever crazy thing that they're going to put in there, and no one knows what's going on. Half the time, even the game master doesn't know what's going on. But I do agree with you. I think the tropes are good, and I actually get annoyed when people try to subvert those tropes. I like the muscly barbarian. Conan. Like, I love that. So I do agree with you, and like I actually think Lamentations works best when you don't run strictly Lamentations. You just drop a Lamentations module in every now and again, because that's when the stuff gets subverted, but it's not getting subverted consistently, such that in and of itself becomes like normal, if that makes sense, right? That's I think where you'll get your tilt.
If you didn't have tropes, people wouldn't have expectations, and then you couldn't mess with their head.
Yeah.
Couple other starred things. Goofus has donated another $7.99. I know someone who is severely visually impaired. Words are important to them, so are rabbits.
Awesome.
Goofus. I think Goofus is in love with my rabbit.
Part of what I do electronically, just to speak to that, is I make sure that the text swap out for images is filled out, because if someone has a text reader, I learned this in a company I worked for, it's going to read, it's an alt image. So if you get a picture of something that for us might be, oh, that's amazing. If somebody didn't take the time to write out what that is, the blind person didn't get it read to them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Legata says, question for world building. Is the process the same if you are making an RPG or a novel, etc.? Figuring out what the lore and magic / technology available is, then making the world around it.
Before I jump into that, I wanted to just say one quick thing about the previous topic, which was what I think you guys were kind of getting at is something that I believe very strongly, which is description is based on genre, right? Like, if you are playing a fantasy game, yeah, there's a bunch of orcs coming, right? But if you're playing a horror game, then, right, that's the last thing that you would want to tell somebody, and you would instead want to viscerally describe them and whatnot. And it has to do, it's all about setting the stage and setting in their heads, right? And like, if I've been playing D&D forever, I know what a goblin looks like.
Well, you do, but if
you describe it, right? But
I would say that if they jump out at you suddenly, describing it instead of just saying they're goblins, like, reenacts that same like jump scare you get when somebody kind of jumps out at you. I mean, if you see them from a distance and walk up to them, then yes, it's silly probably just to say, they're green and have pointy teeth, but if there's that moment of like fear that you've been surprised, I think that's
a very memorable game moment I had. This is a horror game, and I described the horrible, hideous creature. I just said it has too many legs.
That's awesome.
Right? And like,
I love that.
People tried to get more information out of that, and how many legs does it have? Well, do you stop and count them?
Monty, right. I've got one like that stuck with me too. I once said, "How odd! It has fur and feathers." and that just stuck into people's heads and kind of sat there grinding. Legatus, you just dropped an atom bomb of a topic.
Yep.
Yep.
Like, that's about 3.
That's why they've been trying to avoid it.
Do we even want to, like, that's a whole nugget of answer. Do we want to go there?
I mean, you could do a quick summary, and then we could just, make another topic panel for a day I have open.
There are many approaches to creating worlds, both for settings and for games, right, and for novels. Like, there's a lot of ways to approach it. I'm personally a pyramid builder. I build from big foundational, big truths up to like the cat in the tavern. So before I start anything, I'm literally creating a world now, and I'm going to do a whole YouTube series on it. And episode 1 is there time? So I started with, and the answer was actually kind of. So you've got to like go through, I think, a lot of your assumptions to build up to that cat. But I'm very thorough about these things. I also know that Monty is too, because you're very detail oriented.
I am. I am very detail oriented. But here, let me share something coming at this from a different point of view, which is I have worked with many novelists who like want someone to turn their world into an RPG setting, and where they get hung up is the misunderstanding that if I'm writing a novel, I describe the world from the point of view of this one character, and so we see through their eyes, and so I see, the radius around that character as I go through the world.
Mm-hmm.
If you're writing an RPG setting, all bets are off. You got to describe the whole. You got to provide everything, because you don't control where the players go, and you don't just control where they're going to see. And of course, this makes a lot of novelists opt out, because they're like, you're going to have to create more of my world than I created. And I'm like, yeah, probably. And they're like, well, sorry. And I'm sorry too, but that's what RPGs need, right? Yeah. You can't just go where the main character in the novel goes. If you're playing an RPG, you got to know what's around the other bend.
How much licensed stuff have you done, Monty?
Too much.
Yeah. So did you ever work with Paramount or Lucasfilm?
Briefly, yes.
Yeah, so you kind of know what I'm getting at here.
It sounds like it was an experience.
Well, they're both an experience in different ways. I worked with on some Star Wars stuff, and I was lucky enough that a lot of our stuff, eventually the Ouroboros bites its own tail, and like something I named came up in, I think, Andor, and they were drawing from us as we were drawing from them. And it was exactly what you said, right? They were making movies and spinning off novels, but until people had to, we get in our fighter and we're going to this planet, and, you mentioned blue milk. Are there other colors of milk? We're like, geez, we never thought about that.
Right.
But we have to think about that. And then we're producing stuff under license for an established world. We have to submit it to their approvals department. And sometimes we added orange milk and it gets added to their show Bible. And that's happened a few times to people I know, and apparently including me. So it's interesting, because exactly the process you described.
Yeah, for sure. I have all kinds of stories I could bore you with working with both Marvel and DC at the same time.
Oh my God. When Paramount just basically said no to everything. So the difference between Paramount and Lucasfilm is Lucasfilm would work with you, and stuff would sometimes get folded in, whereas Paramount would go, well, that's not Star Trek.
Right.
So what was it? Can you clarify?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody recently who was working on the Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn RPG.
Oh, yeah, it's Cosmere.
And he was talking about, there was, you do a lot of research, and then you wait for Brendan to get back to you, and then you write a section, and you wait for him to prove it. And it's quite a process.
Understands what an RPG is, right?
Yes.
There's an advantage there.
Yeah, and this is his second one too. He's got one out for the Stormlight Archives already. So, Hat says, when describing a scene, I try my best to avoid describing details of things commonly experienced by my players that have no immediate bearing on the unfolding story. But see, I think that's exactly where I started from, though, was the fact that I was like, why are all the things that should exist on a day-to-day basis not existing?
Well, yeah, well, this goes back to my earlier point. When you're running a game as a game master, which is different from the world building, like behind the scenes, building the gazetteer or whatever that games will be run from. The players have their perspective on the world. They're looking at this one thing, and as much as we like to talk about collaborative storytelling and all this other, highfalutin ideals, it's still a game, and players 9 times out of 10 are like, even if they're for the immersion, they're still gaming the game. They still want to make sure they get their points. They find all the things, and so if you start going into a lot of detail about the tavern cat, as cool as that is, as it is as an idea to give that tavern a little bit of character, the players are going to think there's something up about with that cat. It's like the meme that you see where you have like the shrouded, mysterious guy in the corner, but there's like this goblin server that you just sort of named, and they just want to talk to the goblin now.
But you don't need to do a ton of it. You literally just, as you sit down, one of the tavern cats winds its way around your ankle, meowing for food as you call for ale.
So, Hat, I do a lot of making references to things. It's strictly speaking, it's not entirely cool because I'll reference movies a lot, movies and TV. That's kind of like the table, and so and so.
Right.
But it's a lot about drawing connection to things they recognize. So I don't not do the things they recognize. I think it's very important to do the things they recognize. In terms of pacing and how you deliver it, we touched on this earlier when I said I think it's something that Cody can't do or has difficulty because of the aphantasia. But I picture walking into that bar, and I'm not going to go at great length, but I might say, like, the floor has not been cleaned recently. It's pretty crowded. It's not kicked into full gear yet. Farmers are probably still farming. There's a strange smell, probably because of the not cleaning stuff. It's got a little bit of Texas Roadhouse feel. There's some nuts underfoot when you walk across, crunching. You look, that's Gomer, the cavern cat, is watching you as you go to your seat. Like something as simple as that, right? And you can jot down the things like Bonnie and I were talking about, make the note of like crunchy peanuts, tavern cat, so that you could repeat that if you go back to that tavern. But all you really need, I think, is when you walk in someplace. I did a stage show called Epic, which was D20 Tavern, but like 10 years earlier. So people would come up, we'd pick people from the audience, and I had actors and improvisers, and we'd do a live play, but it was on stage, improvised. And one of the things I did to train my actors, as we played a 10-foot room. So you had two groups of people line up, and the person would go through and open the door, and then mimic opening the door. Then the person on the other side would have to say what's in there, and then act it out, right? It was a good way to like train them in very quickly being able to manifest something, because in improv, even more than gaming, just having that hiccup where your gears catch is death. So no matter what it is, if you open the door and you're like, it's Arnold from Different Strokes, like, as long as you said something, you win. But it was interesting seeing people do that exercise, right? Picturing opening the door, picturing what's in that room. And that's largely all you need, is just that point of view. We're the most advanced processors in the world, and we're just describing what a computer game would draw for them. Right?
Well,
Goofus just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to fill out the captions in your publications. A lot of people talk in really self-righteous ways and neglect simple but important things like OCR for screen readers. I have to say, Goofus, I'm not sure people understand how screen readers work. If I hadn't been roommates with Jesse for years, I don't think I would understand how they work. And even with that, it took me a while to understand exactly how they affected pictures. But I do think that's an area where we probably need more understanding and education on how those things work.
And that's one reason I made a point of saying something, is I think as long as when we hear something like that, we call it out so that people who might not have heard about it have now heard about it, right?
Yeah, we
educate the moment.
It was a lot of effort, but we have made the process of going through our PDFs and doing this, right? Because it's so important, right? And we hear it from people who really need it.
Yeah.
I was going to say though, I think that one of the things, like the question that sort of spurred this on was the difference between fiction, right? World building for fiction writing and world building for RPGs. But I think that there's even another subdivision there, which is the difference between what you need to do as a game designer who's making a product that is going to go out to all these different people, and what you do as a GM. Like I GM exactly the way Mike just said. If this place is just like Texas Roadhouse with peanut shells on the floor, I'm gonna say it's just like Texas Roadhouse, right?
Huh.
But I'm never gonna say that in a product, right? I've got to convey that in a different way. But I think that like my advice to GMs all the time is just kind of something that got brought up earlier, right? Figure out what your players are into and focus your descriptions on that, because then they're always going to be interested, right? So if it's the goats, if it's the animals, focus on that, right? If you've got a gun nut among your players, right, tell them exactly what the caliber of the weapon is and all of that stuff. But if nobody cares about that, then just say you got yourself a gun, right? And it just applies to the player, right? Because that's the huge advantage that GMs have over game designers, is that they know exactly who's playing and what they're interested in.
So this is a form of classroom management, and when I actually teach GMing, I refer to it as feeding the beast. So you want to figure out who the people you're sitting across from are, and each person has different needs, right? They're coming up to the hamster water bottle, need something else. That dude needed a fight. That dude needed to be vulgar and be accepted and not told to shut up. That guy wanted to know more about the lore. That guy's a foodie, so you better describe what the tavern's meal is, right? And gun nut, whatever. But once you figure that out, you can feed the beast. Well, and the equivalent in fantasy is you run to there are people that are sword nuts, and they do historical fiction, or they do, pretend, but they are all mega experts, and they want to know, is it Capoferro? Like, well, kind of, but from this region. You can find ways, and I think one of your keys to success in being a game master is you're facilitating shared storytelling, but you're also feeding the beast. So that way when they walk away, they get fed by both what you accomplish together mechanically and in story, but also their little needy gotcha thing, right? Sometimes attention. There's
Has
sometimes
anybody ever
people
read?
just need to be,
I think you can go even further if you. This is like really deep GM theory, right?
Yeah.
But like, if you know that Bob, he's in the SCA and he just deals with swords and armor and stuff all the time. I would, if I'm running that, and Bob's in my game, I'm going to turn to Bob rather than try to describe the armor and the weapons and get it wrong, and then have Bob tell me what I did wrong. I'm going to say, Bob, what does this plate armor that he's wearing look like, right? And now Bob's super engaged. He's rewarded for some knowledge, and he feels really good, and he's going to pay even more attention, right?
Yeah.
Has anybody ever read the Ice Prophet series?
No.
It's so the author was very, very obviously into ice running, which is like when you take wind ships on ice and basically go ice skating with ships. It's an actual sport. It obviously only exists in very certain parts of the world. Sure. He was very obviously really into it in real life, because there are like pages and pages and pages and pages in the first book. There are nothing except the fine points of ice running and like what could go wrong and everything else. And for people who like detail, it was probably wonderful. I thought it was fascinating because I actually had never heard of the sport despite living in a very cold area. But I kind of laughed about it, and I was like, man, you can tell this was he really just wanted to write a book about ice running, and he turned it into a fantasy novel instead.
Bonnie's got a good point though, right? Like the guy at my fictional table, that's the foodie, asking him, "What do you think the dwarf served?" Like, definitely brings it in. This is a pretty common GM trick. When I have somebody do a nasty critical and finish somebody off, I always say, "So what happened? Describe it for me."
Right.
Because then, they get very exciting. They get, Which, yes, you'd have my eldest daughter would play for sure.
Yarnwich, that would you could actually make a supplement for I'm having a brain Brindlewood Bay, which is a very cozy game about a bunch of elderly ladies that get around and like knit and solve mysteries.
There's a guy online that has a YouTube channel that makes medieval weapons with knitting.
Sweet.
That he
Wow.
tests them. Yeah, it's hysterical, ridiculous. Love it.
Maybe that's why so many modern RPGs have so much negative space built into their world building. They're trying not to overbuild because ultimately GMs are going to personalize it.
I
That
kind
would
of
make sense.
I agree. Well, when I was running games in the '90s, to combat some of the lore buffs in my group who would like try to contradict me. Well, that's not exactly what happens in Cormire, right, or whatever, in Forgotten Realms, for example, or that's they'll just correct me because they read it in the book. I would always tell them, hey, nothing is canon when I'm running a game. I've taken over the world at this point, and I do think that you run into this issue where there is too much. And I don't think this was all game worlds, but where you have game worlds that have a very very popular. I'm going to pick on Forgotten Realms actually for a little bit here. They've had a lot of popular, novel runs. R.A. Salvatore pretty much co-opted what Dark Elves are like. You know what I mean? And I do like the Dark Elf trilogy. Don't get me wrong. I thought that was really awesome and brutal and cool. But and there comes a point where I, as a game master, almost feel constrained to like fit whatever the popular understanding is of a game world. So I do like a little bit of space to kind of breathe my own into something. And to Monty's point,
Right.
Malik's point, I like it when my players do more than just sit there like bumps on the log, waiting to react to me, but are proactive and adding to the game world. I do give them a little bit of a space to, describe, to do something like if I just say you walk into a ballroom, they don't need to ask me if they can swing from the chandelier. There's a chandelier there. It's a ballroom. They can swing from it if they want to. So it's things like that I think are help keep engagement if you aren't a control freak as a game master. You know what I mean,
Yeah.
and let that table breathe. But yeah, I
Yeah.
kind of agree. I like a little bit enough detail to get the themes of the game world from the author, and some of the important, like I guess, concepts and history markers.
So every game I run that's got an established world, every single one, the first thing I do, because knowledge kills mystery, right? So
Sure,
we
yeah,
can't have mystery. I say all the things you think you know, including all the stuff in the monster manual. That's all legend lore. That's stuff you've heard. So, for example, vampires in my world, I'll usually will take one of the common vampire things, and it's not true. It's something entirely different. So if you don't go and research, you don't know what's true in my version of the world until you go experience it or research it. Similarly, you can do that with history and all the rest too. So if you don't want to have to know every little bit of like dark elf politics going back 3,000 years, you can say, well, you've heard this and that,
right.
and that way you do what suits the story best. And as long as you keep pretty good notes of the things that you've verified, right? I think as long as you don't make this a hand wave to never have details, if you use it responsibly, it's a very good tool, and it keeps them guessing, right? Like they don't know for a fact when they encounter a wraith what its powers are going to be, which makes that encounter scary again. And 80% of the time, it'll be exactly what's in the book. But that fifth time, it's going to be something. Yeah, the wraiths in my world are material. They can't walk through walls. They manifest with ectoplasm, so it turns out the easiest way to get away from them is close the door. They largely forgot how to use doorknobs. So they just stand there, which mythologically is fairly solid, right? That feels very Celtic, actually. That closing a door shows them are unwelcome when they can't open it. They're physical, so they can't just walk through it. and then you put that doubt in their head, so they have to engage with each thing separately, which ends up having dividends.
Legata says, is world building different based on the platform, creating an RPG or computer video game, cartoon, or anime? I would say it differs depending on the system, even because Shadow of the Demon Lord is never going to have unicorns in it.
I think the answer to this question actually goes to the earlier questions about the difference between a novel and a game world. Because I know when I play, like, all due respect to the solo RPGers out there, I don't understand it. I to me, D&D is a group activity, but more power to you. But when I feel like playing by myself, that's when I play a computer game. That's when I pop in. My favorite game is Mass Effect. It's just I get so immersed into that. Such a great story to get caught up in. And the world kind of unfolds as you need it, as you're kind of exploring through it. Whereas with with an RPG, and I'm sorry, Mass Effect is more like a story in that regard. But with an RPG, and especially if you're playing like an open sandbox, your players can go anywhere. So you better have an understanding of at least the starting region, and have that developed enough where when the players decide to go, not to the cave that's an easy 2 mile trek away from Hamlet or whatever, the starting town, they decide they want to take the 3 day trek to check out this other city. You're familiar with what's in the city and that sort of thing. So
This is why I only plan like one session ahead. Where are you going? Where are you going next time? We're going 2 weeks away. All right, that's what I'm planning out is 2 weeks.
Yeah,
At least 2 weeks away.
Yeah, and playing off the cuff, that's a skill that takes a while to develop. That's why random tables are fun. I don't know what's there. Let's check and see what's there. Roll. Oh, yep. Apparently, it's a chimera lair or something.
So it's a lot more work, and it does take a certain amount of experience. I prefer to build in terms of how things work, and then you can iterate. So I don't write, if I write a barony, I don't write every single place, but I know roughly how villages work, what kind of buildings are there, how big they are. Is there a chapel? Is there a shrine nearby? Do they have road? Do they have a stable? And then I can, without using a table, I can pre-build, and I do have stuff, because I do get hung up on the idea that we're playing a game. It's something you said. Like, I try not to just invent off the cuff, because then we're not oppositional, right? Like, I'm on your side, we're telling you a story, but I don't want to just make up what you encounter, because then you haven't faced a challenge and overcome the challenge. You have played a thing with a GM that kind of was complicit in helping you overcome it, which in my mind is never immersive and is deeply unsatisfying, right? So I do have the stuff prepped, but I prep it kind of in terms of, like, you ever do the kind of cooking where you use ice cube trays and you pre-do sauces and butters, and you can literally do a recipe by plinking the different things off your ice cube trays?
When my
It's like
wife was
that.
when my wife was pregnant with our son, before she got to she made all this stuff so it would be easier for me. So yeah,
Ah,
I'm familiar
so
with
you can
that.
GM like that, right? You're like,
Right.
this is in the Southern District. I know what cairns look like in that district.
Correct. Yeah.
I know that they're often haunted with these kinds of creatures. I've written a bunch of that stuff and made maps of those cairns. So I'm not just doing crazy make-em-ups with you. You are walking through a world that exists, has structure, right? But
Yeah.
I don't have to, like, when I was 20, when I was 14, I had books like that, full of, like, I would just iterate and build the whole damn thing by hand. And then eventually I figured out, well, yeah, but if you build the things that result in the thing, you've built it. All you have to do is figure out what it's composed of. And then you have the thing, right? Do some pre-built types of archetypes for NPCs. Well, I have a whole book that's just, here's all kinds of bandits in this region. Then if they run into bandits the way of the Cairn, you don't have to have a pre-done encounter, but you go, okay, I'm going to do the modestly tough bandits from my list, and you're good. So as long as you're willing to do the prep time, you've got your sauce and your pre-done garlic butter, and you can make it seem. I love when I can make the world feel like you're not. We used to think in terms of hexes, right? Because everything was a hex crawl, and
Right.
the idea that the graph paper or the hex paper would run out. Like I hated the notion that you would get to the edge and the world would just stop. The idea that you could go anywhere, like in Skyrim, was a big part of what jazzed me about RPGs. Like I could go in that boat and find out what that island is. That's the good stuff, right?
Agreed. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
for sure.
As your GM says, for in-person games, I like getting a cheap set of poker chips and letting players swap some of their game currency for chips. They can physically tip a barkeep or give a coin to a beggar. I've been noticing a lot of this type of stuff. So, for instance, I ran a convention game where you get invited to a party. And on suggestions, I actually went and made invitations so that each player got a fancy looking invitation to this party. I think they work really well for convention games. How do you feel about them for kind of ongoing games in general?
I love props, right? Props is a just a different kind of world building, right? So if there's a letter from the king and you've intercepted his messenger and you have it and you pull out and unroll the scroll, man, if you can actually give them a scroll and it shows them what a scroll from the king would look like and uses the language that the king would use and all of that kind of thing, you've just done a whole bunch of world building without doing any world building.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Yeah, I've used props, but I try to do it sparingly because there was a time where my in-person gaming crew. There's a couple of YouTubers. Professor DM was one of them who would do a lot of crafting, and they show you how to make these cool sets, and so like we would do that. We got into that a little bit, but that would like take more time than actually sitting down and like prepping the game and stuff. So I think, and then if you do it too much, I think they kind of lose their luster. Like getting the scroll from the king the first time is going to be awesome, but if it's every time there's a scroll, it's going to
Sure.
lose its luster.
Well, that's
But I've
kind of what I
also,
wondered.
yeah, but I do like using them. I just try to be very sparing.
So
with it.
another DEI thing, as a teacher, some people, and this is also true of one of my kids, and these are adult children, by the way. When I say kid, they have the need to work with their hands. So it used to annoy me because I thought you're not paying attention. There are some people that need something working here and something working here. So
I'm
they
that
used to
guy.
have like a Rubik's cube or something. So manipulatives, right? So when you're dealing with kids, you want to make sure they have manipulatives. So part of what the poker chip thing does, which is a brilliant idea, by the way, because then you can flip a coin to the Witcher, and you have a thing to flip, right? It's not exposing you to, because Mateus, you're right. If you're not careful, the game becomes making the game, and it's super cool. But I'd rather play and make more game than make the
Right.
game to make the game. But the poker chips took you zero time,
Yeah.
Right.
and still it means you can pile them up like you're in Vegas. You can flip them. You can like when you're punctuating, you can say like, are we going to go investigate the Elven Lord? And you can push a bunch of coins to your buddy, like kind of intimating that you're paying him off. Like there's so much you can get
Yeah.
for a $2 prop, right?
Right.
The props
I
don't have to be super amazing.
I found that even so I did a Viking Shadow Dark game once,
Mm.
and they spent a lot of time on the ocean. And all I did was get a tablecloth that was like a roughly blue piece of cloth that I picked up for like $3 at out of a used bin. And I just put it down and it actually looked like waves. So I do like those kinds of things. But that's kind of what I wondered was like, if I use minis all the time, the expectation becomes There will be
Oh.
minis all the times. It's not cool anymore. And I don't always host, so having to pack all this stuff up and move it to wherever we're playing that day
So
sometimes becomes
the
problematic.
feed the beast thing I was talking about, if I do pro jamming, right? So the people I'm playing for are not always my friends. They're not people. I mean, everyone's kind of my friend. I'm that kind of guy, but they're not people I know well. There are people that really want to think tactically. I'm not that guy. Like, I really don't like 5 foot steps. The part that I really dislike about the new edition of D&D is the little extra weapon mastery things that give one more toggle on off thing that I literally can't keep track of without having like a roster of them. Like, what do you mean you got a double notch? Like, too much to reference that movie, too many notes, right?
Right.
So for those players, to make them to feed their beast, they need to be able to think tactically. So normally what I do is I've got a Go kit that has a red and wipe off map, and it's got some little numbered tokens with symbols. So like there's one for monsters. I bought it online. It's very nice. And I can do one tactical combat so that while we're in the middle of I'm a very narrative guy. Everything's like, we think it out, we imagine together. But if these people want to also imagine in that tactical sense, there's no reason we can't provide that to them, right? And I don't think you need to have beautiful miniatures. Like, I would sell a foot to go play with Picorni and his, right? Like, his layout is amazing. There's a guy that did a maze that works for What a Workshop, and his setup, again, I would sacrifice goats. Sorry, goating. But to go to Weta and play, right? When I do stuff, because I love building terrain, I will save it for a climactic fight. So that way I can lay out something that you can go like, you see this. And that impact moment is great. But generally, yeah, I'm with you. I'm a theater of the mind guy.
Yeah, me too. I think that again, this is the kind of high level DMing or GMing stuff here, but like I would encourage people to not do the same thing every time, right? Like if you are playing with miniatures this week and you've got a big tactical sort of thing, great. Next week, all theater to mind, right? And
Mix it
make
up.
it
Yeah.
because the important thing there is that you are communicating. Okay, these miniatures are cool. This isn't the game, right?
Yeah.
The
Exactly.
game is what we are talking about right now. The game, no matter what game you're playing, it comes down to just talking, right? The core rule of every RPG is talk, and that's the game. And anything else, can just make other parts of the game special. And tonight's going to be a really visual thing. We've got these cool visual aids. We've got these, all this stuff, right? But don't expect it, right? And the nice thing is that then, you know, you don't. No one's ever disappointed that way if they know that they shouldn't expect beautiful painted miniatures, but when they show up, oh my god, right?
I asked somebody once because I was thinking about running kind of a small campaign of Night an Avalon RPG, and I was going to have them going into a museum that had been absorbed by the machine, and I wanted a visual piece just for not for them to go through, not for the combat, but just so that they had the impression of this once proud, beautiful museum that has been like overwhelmed by this. And it wasn't going to do anything except set the mood. And I asked them about it. I said, before I go to all the trouble of building this, what do you think? And every single one of them said, unless it has something to do with the actual like running of the game, I don't care. I don't want it. And I thought that was so weird because I was like, I mean, is atmosphere? And this is the same person who loves 10 candles because of the atmosphere that the 10 candles.
So here's the other thing that took me a long time to learn. I used to always ask a bunch of questions of people. I don't anymore. because people need to know their own mind and then feel like they're in a safe place to communicate it to you and then have the right words to communicate it. So something that's a an impact thing like that, you're not gonna, in my experience, get useful feedback on do you want that scene setting impact piece. So I don't think you necessarily got a fully informed answer on that. I think the only way that person was going to be able to tell you, sadly, was after the fact. So in
So this
general,
is a players don't really know what they want.
well, seriously, often the case. And then, like when I talked about like the feed the beast thing, I don't sit them down and say, "Okay, this is one of my principles of game mastering is I feel I've got to feed the beast for each of you. What is your beast? Tell me." Like never, because dear God, no.
Well,
Uh,
in this particular case, it was just because it was going to be a tremendous amount of work. And I really didn't want to spend weeks on this thing if it turned out that no one was going to be interested.
so this is the teacher life coach in me. If it wasn't going to bring you joy to do it, don't do it.
I'm goal oriented. Doing something, finishing things and doing it well and having it appreciated is what brings me joy.
So the first
It's not the
12
doing, it's the doing never brings me joy. It's the end goal that brings me
So
joy.
the only problem there is anytime that the satisfaction involves somebody else reacting in a way or having to give you something back, you're screwed. You can never rely on that happening. And that's not just gaming, that's life.
Like, yeah.
You know, I'm with you. And I was like, you know, for a long time, that was if I didn't feel like what I did was appreciated, it's like, look, it's a gift. The point of a gift is not for someone to say thank you or to give you a gift back. You give the gift and it's done. GMing is a gift. You know, you're providing this thing for these people. You're like, I'm Gandalf. I've invited you on an adventure. Do you want to come? And at that point, it's no longer transactional. Like I don't think it should be.
I agree.
You are aware that Gandalf did not say, "Do you want to come?" He made them come.
Yeah, Gandalf was an angel and kind of a dick.
Goofus the Doofus, another $7.99 Australian. Thank you so much. I've learned a lot from this stream. It has been a pleasure listening to each of you.
Yeah, just to bounce off of that, I think in some ways, especially when you're really into the campaign that you've been working on, your world that you've been working on, you know, there is this sort of desire to hear from your players, "Good job," you know. And if they're your friends, your longtime friends, I know my friends, they just assume. They just assume I know that they're happy because we're getting together every couple of weeks to play. But I do think it's not going to hurt, especially if you know them well, to follow up. Just be like, "Hey, so how's everything going? You know, are you happy with this? Are you happy with that?" But it's always going to be after the fact. You just got to do the thing that you think is cool, and if it doesn't work, I'm sure they'll tell you.
Your applause was somebody gets a crit and they shout.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Your applause is when somebody writes down an interesting name.
Yep. Exactly. When they're taking detailed notes. Yeah.
We're always talking about advice for the GM and never nearly enough advice for the player, right? And so the takeaway I think here is that if you're a player, you know, tell your GM when something's cool, right? You know, that's going to go a long way. But as the GM, right, like if they show up the next session, they probably liked it, right? And that's probably, you know, just human nature. That's probably all the things you're going to get. But that's a way of saying thank you, right?
My applause. The greatest compliment I've ever gotten on any topic was the very first time I ever ran Numenera. There was the GM intrusion cards, and I said, "I've never run this game before. Do you guys want me to make up GM intrusions, or should I use the cards just until I'm like more familiar with the rules?" And one of my players said, "You have the most terrifying imagination I have ever seen in my life. I vote for the cards."
Nice. Nice.
Nice.
You know, I
I
realized
was like, that is the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me.
one of the weird things about being an elder statesman of gaming is I've been around long enough. I now think I have permission to give experience points to people. You get plus 50 experience points for that. I'm going to start carrying business cards with XP awards, just hand to people. Because Mike said so. Here you go. Did we
Should
cover
do that.
everything, Cody?
Well, I don't know. What else do you think
So
people need
here's
to know?
one weird thing that's not relevant to anything. If you squint and look at the screen, the middle goat looks like the crypt keeper. It's been kind of bothering me.
That would be the right-hand goat is Cypher, and that would be her twins from this year, Osiris and Isis.
So Isis is the crypt keeper?
Yes.
Nice. Nicest.
I don't know. Does
Osiris.
it tell us more about the goats, or does it tell us more about Mike?
Oh, it's all me. I am deeply broken.
Osiris is the twin who is regularly trying to like bang his mother and his sister. You know, in true
Nice.
ancient religion fashion.
Those are terrifying.
I posted a picture today because I finally managed to get the fence to the point where he could not get at his female relatives. And he immediately just walked over to a tree and put his head against the tree and refused to like look at me or take treats or anything.
Oh, rejected. Oh.
I was like, you're 12 weeks old. You're not even old enough.
Wow, it sounds like 4th of July in Texas.
I did have another question and I've forgotten what it was. Does anybody in the chat have a question, by the way? Legatus popped up one. EV Mux will catch up in a minute, but when you GM other than minis, have you ever used background music? There's another non-visual interesting.
I think background music definitely can help set the tone, the mood, help with the immersion. You know, I actually don't like when I was in my teens. You know, we'd be listening to grunge rock while rolling dice or whatever. I don't do that anymore because I find that too distracting. But like getting some good music from like some of these ambient mixes that you can find on YouTube, especially if you're running horror or something. I know when we were messing around with the One Ring, briefly we had the Lord of the Rings soundtrack playing in the background, and when you're in the Shire and you're hearing the Shire theme, it's just really it was really cool. Though I've had some bad experiences, like just the wrong type of music starts playing. If you just have some like random yeah, exactly. All right, guys, you open up the tomb and inside, like no.
Do you know what that song is? Do you know what Hamsterdams is?
No.
It's the song from the Disney version of Robin Hood.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
When they're going down the road, they're like,
yes. I haven't heard that in forever. Oh my God, You're right. Yes.
So I can't do it. It's too many things. Like I already shared that to describe something, I enter the Mind Palace, walk through it, describe it. If I'm doing that, juggling rules as crunchy as 5e, keeping notes, and then I keep kind of psychologist tabs on my players to figure out like this is going to sound like this term sounds problematic, but it's not. There's a term touched, which you use in meetings. So touch means I used your name several times, Matthias. That was every time was a touch. So that's to make sure people you're talking with know that you're paying attention to them, right? So I'll keep I literally will put a dot next to names to make sure that I have touched everyone at the table, which sounds fucking terrible. It sounds very Louis C.K. and I did not mean it to, but you know what I mean. So
yeah.
All of that and juggling that, if you add music, I love music. It pulls me out. So I end up listening. I can't do it.
I use music sometimes, but I have specific. This goes back to Feed the Beast, I suppose. I have had players specifically say, "Hey, I can't deal with that. That's that's too much." So what I did instead was I found a single piece of music that I thought was appropriate in terms of vibe and mood and everything. And I said, okay, this is the theme music for this game, right? And I play that piece of music at the beginning when everyone is just sort of sitting down and gathering and everything. That's the
Yeah.
music that gets played. It's like listening, when you hear the X Files theme, right? You know that things are going to get creepy and weird. And
I was a
so,
Hero Games guy, and when we played Champions, we would have a theme song. We would name our games whatever the comic book was. Like we're
sure,
playing Team Up, and you'd play, whatever the theme was. Yeah, yeah, that or in horror, if there's moments where I don't have to juggle, like I can then play something because it's not going to pull me away, right? Which most often happens in horror. You're like, okay, now you finally go on the ship that's been frozen in the ice. You climb up, and I can put on something by Aphex Twin or whatever, and not just blur out and stop being able to do math.
right.
So as long as I'm careful when I needle drop, I'm okay. In fantasy, if somebody wants it though, because you're right again about both feed the beast and DEI, because some people can't handle it,
Right.
some people love it. But then I have someone else DJ. You hand them one of the apps, like one of the iPhone apps, and you say like, "Dude, don't be an asshole about this. Please don't play hamster dance. But go ahead and give us music." And again, it's something else for them to do, and it doesn't hurt anything. So
I have one of my players. He's not blind, but he's very visually impaired. And so he already kind of struggles with the character sheet. And he has specifically requested no music because he needs to be able to focus. But I do sometimes think that it takes away a lot from some of the games we play. So for instance, the game where you're getting invited to the party, I really thought that having background music, that was like Italian Renaissance party music would have been like really perfect for that.
yeah,
And it wouldn't, it could have been quiet and it could have been repetitive and just in the background. Um, but again, I tend to want those like little non-visual details. Ozymandias says, random thought, how important to you is mapping the world to the world building process? Maybe I'm old school, but it's a crucial first step for me to make a good map.
I
Oh,
I
go
don't
ahead.
I don't necessarily think it's the first step, but it's early. It's an early step, and that's because I'm a visual person, and I need to think about where something is in relationship to something else, because that's gonna inform. If the people in this particular town live really close to the sea, that's going to inform what kind of people they are, what they do for a living, etc. Right? Um, and so I think I might think about sort of the even bigger, grander, broader details. Maybe not quite to the point of is there time, but something like that, and then kind of eventually get to the map. But I think I
I
think I think it's
love
very
I love map making. My Incarnate account has literally hundreds of maps in it.
Um, I'm kind of like with Monte Cook on this. It's early, but it's not usually what I start with. I like starting with a theme, like
Yeah,
what is this? What
yeah.
do I want? What kind of experience do I want to provide to the players? And it could be something as simple as sci-fi horror, or something a little bit more specific, like monotheistic religion, dealing with a polytheistic religion or something like that, right? And that's going to set the tone of a lot of things, and it's going to set help me develop like some of the people, culture, places. And then once I start in my own mental space, start seeing how some of these things are related, then I'll sit down and draw maps.
yeah.
I struggle with it, especially if you were just to hand me a blank piece of paper and say start drawing. I'd be like, "Whoa, this looks stupid."
Have you ever tried the
But
handful of change trick, Mateus?
Is that where you like drop it all and just
Yeah,
sort of?
yeah. And
I started using that. I actually do
it's
that.
pretty neat. Yeah. Use
I
the
actually
different
saw
types of coins for different kinds of terrain. It's great.
actually a guy take rice and put it on a
Oh,
piece of paper, and the rice helped create really nice borders and stuff. But
Nice.
like, but yeah. So I don't until I have an idea of like the basic like starting region and whatnot, and like the players and kind of like what you said, Monty. Like, are they near the ocean? Are they fishermen? Once I get that idea in my head, then I feel a little more comfortable sitting down and actually doing the map. So
This is probably going to be our final question for this evening because we're low on time here. With all the random tables and supplements and sourcebook, do you use all these in your world building either before or during play?
I'm old school. For me, it's both. I'll have ideas, and then I'll be like, I don't know what to do with that, and then I flip open to one of the many supplements I have with random tables in it, and just start rolling. And like I kind of alluded to earlier, sometimes my players go someplace where I'm not, I haven't really mapped or I haven't really developed. The random tables help me figure out what's there. And I talk about this a lot on my channel, especially with people I've met for the first time. I always ask them what their Appendix N is, like what are the books, music, all that stuff that's influenced you. Because if you know what your Appendix is, and I think that's the first thing every game master needs to figure out, what is your Appendix N? When your players do go off the beaten path, you have that Appendix N in the back of your brain that you can pull from and fill in those gaps, and without it being weird or goofy or gonzo, unless you like gonzo, and then go back later and then write it all down because you've been taking notes and all that other stuff. So for me, it's both.
I don't use random tables, except I use them incorrectly, right? If someone gives me a random table, I'm not going to pull out my dice, but I might read through it and say, "Ooh, that's a cool idea. I wouldn't have thought of that." That's how I use random tables. But I very much have respect for people who
oh yeah.
do use random tables and whatnot and create that their world or their adventure or whatever based on random tables. I think that's great. It's just not the way my brain works.
I am a random table. I've been doing this long enough that I used to play a game with my kids when they were little, where they could pull my arm like a one-armed bandit, and it was when they were first playing D&D. They needed character names, and I give them an idea, and every time they pulled my arm, I just give them another one. And I'm very much the kind of dad where it was like, you could ask me to play the question game, and I could do it all day, right? Again, but I've had years of like game designer and improviser experience. So the longest one of them pulled on my arm for new names was over an hour. And they literally said, okay, Dad, fine. You can do it. So yeah, I like with Monty, I fully respect if it helps you, absolutely no harm to it, no shame to it. It'll help you hone your instrument, as it were. It's just like I have done it so many times. Again, this sounds like a flex, but we figured I was talking to Stan, I think, I figured out I've run at least 5,000 sessions, which is like, again, the counter flex is, how many things could I have done the 10,000 hours? I could be like a concert pianist and a surgeon. So, okay. Instead, I've got a record, a ridiculous number of RPGs, but it does mean I just don't need the tables anymore.
So I try very hard to get to conventions when I can and take, all the indie games that nobody's ever heard of with me to try and give them a little bit of an audience. And I go to PortCon every year because it's the closest one to me, which means it's only 2.5 hours away. And there is always a lady who comes in cosplay as a quest giver, and you just go up and you push the button, and she will just give you a random quest, like to either locate something or find something or take a picture of something, or and same thing. Like, she sometimes has these huge lines, and she just snaps them off. Like,
that's what I do at Ren Fairs. I dress as a wizard, and I'll usually walk up to kids, like kids that did the rent-a-costume. Like, you look like an adventurer. Are you currently on a quest? I'm like, oh no. Like, oh, you see these stones? Some of them are special. And I'll just do that all day, and it's really delightful. And the kids will light up. It's great.
Yeah, she just says she basically just wears an exclamation point over
Oh,
her
that's awesome.
over her head.
That's
And you
awesome.
just come up and push the button and she'll just like rattle off.
Does she have the
Just
like the dealy bobber like on
Yep.
the head? Oh, it's
Yep.
awesome.
Yep. And she she goes through ahead of time before she puts her costume on, I assume, and like figures out where everything is, because she's like, you have to locate this vendor, or you have to like
Right.
take a picture of this, person, or you have to like
So she does prep.
um but the
It's
but the
GM
fact
prep
that
right there.
One of us.
the fact that she spends 4 days just rattling off quests to these tremendous, and like I said, I have seen her with these huge long lines.
Yeah.
And she just keeps rattling them off. It's pretty amazing. I wouldn't be able to remember what the place looked like for 4 days.
When I was in Austin, I go to Sherwood Forest Fair. You can find me there, running D&D or doing that. I'm gonna maybe do that here, but I've not become enough of the Oregon community quite yet. It's lovely out here, though.
Well,
There is
that
a-
was the thing, was
There's
that
a fair here.
this summer they moved to a new location
Hmm.
because they had maxed out. They could only handle something like 3,500 people at their
Yeah.
previous location. So they moved locations. So she had to learn like a whole new setup and a whole new everything this year.
Yeah.
But it was very nice. We had like 4,200 people or something like that. So it was great. All right, we have about 5 minutes to go, and I want to make sure that everybody has a minute to plug their stuff. So, what have you got going on? Where can people find you? What do you have coming out for stuff? And do you have any other interviews? Monty, let's start with you and go around the horn.
Right. So MonteCookGames.com is my company's website. I'm not on any other platforms, so that's, if you want to find out what I'm doing, that's where to go. It just so happens that it really is a coincidence that today we launched a new crowdfunding campaign for a Cypher supplement that is called Cypher Decoded. And it basically takes the Cypher system and breaks it all down and says, well, if you don't like D20s and you want to use 3d6 and get a bell curve, do this, and here's what effect it will have on your game. So it's just sort of like, if you're a kit basher, if you're a tinkerer, right, it's going to be your kind of, or if you just want some optional rules, right? Oh, I want some new species or whatever. And you asked if there were other interviews. Yes, I am on tomorrow night. I am doing an interview with an organization called Cypher Unlimited, which, as you can predict, is the sort of the Cypher Discord, people who like Cypher thing, and I'm going to be doing an AMA there with the guys who run that.
Okay. Mike? Or Malix?
You can find stuff about me on Nystul.com. I don't know why it took me so long to look up my own name, and it was available. So my website is now Nystul.com. Easy to remember. And whether or not you can spell it depends on how long you've been playing D&D.
True.
I've been producing Nuked for a while now. 3rd edition is going to drop soon. There's a free test drive of the system available on Test RPG Now. I'm working on doing a live play series called Nystul's Table, where I'm going to invite people. At some point, I'm going to reach out to Monty, for example. Various folk I know that I think would be fun to have at a gaming table. And we're going to play some games. And we're going to use a variation of Liar's Poker. So it's called, I think it's called Braggarts and Bullshitters. The idea is you have a character sheet, but I'm never going to look at it. And you're going to tell me what your abilities are and tell me what your skill rolls are. But yeah, I don't have to see your dice. You can tell me whatever you want, and I will occasionally say, that doesn't sound right. So you can get away with anything as long as I don't call bullshit on you. So
No.
it will allow us to not need to know the system, and as long as everybody is playing, the fun will be people will try to push, obviously. And I'm getting some pretty fun people, and that's going to be cool. I've got a couple of games coming down the pike, but if you watch Nystul, you can also find me on the Facebook, the Book of Faces. I'm pretty active, both as the Wandering Wizard as a pro page, or just look me up, just Mike Nystul, and give me a hey howdy.
Okay. And Lord Mateus.
I have the YouTube channel, The Second Watch, Friday nights, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's kind of like a late show. We try to keep it. Gary and I try to keep it informal. We'll have a few drinks while we're talking with whoever we're talking about. We'd love to see you in chat. Our chat's been great, very active. They ask our guests questions, and then when we have chill streams or panel discussions, kind of like this, they're very engaged. We love them. So you can find me there, Lord Mattias, The Second Watch. I saw my link tree kind of popped up. There you will find access to my blog that I try to maintain, but also links to my itch.io page, Lulu for the Red Room stuff that I've worked on, and then on TTRPG I have a Shadow Dark anthology I just released called The Living Darkness Volume 1. It's got 4 adventures in it, horror themed, for $9.99 the PDF. And you'll also find my Lamentations PDF there called A Gift for All of Norway. But yeah, check me out. Would love to hear your comments and your thoughts. And like I said, Second Watch, where Gary and I just, try to have fun with the hobby. We disagree at times, but we're not disagreeable. We take pride in our approach to that sort of thing.
All right. And I am, of course, the Eclectic Goat. You can find me here generally on Wednesday evenings. Also, tomorrow morning, I've been working my way through the classic Diablo series. So I will be doing some streaming early tomorrow morning on Diablo 2. I have no idea. This game is turning out to be much longer than I remember it being. I think most of my memories of Diablo 2, I'm actually thinking Diablo 1, which was just as amazing as I remembered. Next Wednesday on 8/26, we are going to have Elevator Pitch Day. So if you have an indie game that is coming out or something new coming out, there will be 10 minutes on the clock for whoever wants to show up, give an elevator pitch, get feedback from the chat if that's your druthers, and or answer a couple of questions. So for 2 hours, we are just going to show you what people have going on. And everyone is welcome. I want to thank Goofus for his many, many contributions to Hopper's feed account, to the Agile Monk, and to the Dungeon Delver. You are all hugely appreciated. As previously mentioned, I always have medical bills that need paying these days, unfortunately. I am still working on my trap chest, as he will be here for pitch night. Excellent. I am still working. I want to do I don't do very many pre-recorded videos because they don't seem to get a huge amount of traction. But I had this tremendous urge to do a comparative video of the old Heroes show that was out in, I think, 2004, and Alphas, which was in 2011. They kind of bookended that whole gritty superhero genre. And so I started binge watching the whole thing, and then the cheerleader passed away. So that seems like it might be in poor taste now, so I may put that off for a little bit until things have settled on that front. I was planning on putting that out next week, but I think I might hold off on that. I think it would feel too much like, even though I started this a month ago, I think it would feel too much like playing off sad things, and we don't do that here on this channel. So I want to thank the panel for being here. You guys have been absolutely amazing. I want to thank the chat. I want to thank everyone for putting up with EV Mux being EV Mux, except on steroids. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful night, and I hope we will see some of you tomorrow in the chat while I'm busy killing demons. And happy headbutting.
It's a fucking good.
Eclectic Goat's got videos of indie authors and cinema love. A passion for the weird and the strange. She's snappily dressed and only slightly deranged. Come and meet the eclectic goat, lover of classics and whiskey notes, disciple of horror and the written word. Happy headbutting, come join the herd. Shows might be a little improper. We've got real zombie, fake whizzes the otter, pizza in one hoof, glass in the other, deciding which role-playing games we will cover. Come and meet the eclectic goat, lover of classics and whiskey notes, disciple of horror and the written word. Happy headbutting, come join the herd. Got a thing for black and white screens, crappy horror with low budget scenes. Choose on the history, spits out the law. Time for another whiskey pour. Come and meet the eclectic goat, lover of classics and whiskey notes, disciple of horror and the written word. Happy headbutting, come join the